If at first you don't get caught, do it and do it again. Imagine this. You're in need of some cash, so you saunter over to an ATM, insert your debit card and select withdraw, and walk away with money only to find out that it never withdrew from your account at all. This doesn't happen once, not even twice, but over and over again. Yeah, in our dreams. Well, dreams came true for this bloke turned millionaire. Come along as we delve into the $1.6 million glitch of a lifetime. The year was 2011. Adele's Rolling in the Deep was number 1, The Voice first aired, The Oprah Winfrey Show aired its last episode, and 29-year-old Dan Saunders from Australia became a millionaire through hard work and dedication. Well, if you've watched any of our previous videos, you know that's not exactly how this story is going to go. Dan grew up in suburban Melbourne, Australia. By the time of the events covered in this video, he was living in Wangaratta, a city 147 miles from Melbourne. In 2011, Dan was a bartender at a pub called the West Side Tavern and was engaged at the time. He described this period of his life as going through the motions. Well, all of that is about to change. On the night of 2011, February 22nd, Dan was hanging out with one of his mates at a pub called the Bull's Head. Like many of us after splurging on drinks, he noticed he was running low on funds, so he stepped out for a moment and went to an ATM around the corner. At first, he ran a balance inquiry on his savings account, but it didn't work. So then he tried to do the same on his credit card and still had no luck. As reported by Newsweek, Dan wasn't one to give up because, again, most of us have been there. Saunders transferred cash from his MasterCard to his savings account, which were linked together. He said the screen then said transaction canceled, but the machine still gave him $200. Interestingly enough, there was no record of the transaction, so he thought, hey, maybe that's the ATM just down at the moment. We've all experienced this ATM is temporarily out of service message or something to that effect, but I don't recall any ATM dispensing cash without it reflecting on my bank account. Now, with cash in hand, Dan returned back to the pub and downed 5 to 6 pints of beer. Pints? Huh? Talk about getting drunk, or pissed as they say in the land down under. When he finally leaves for the night, he walks past the ATM. Somehow in his inebriated state, curiosity got the best of him. I bet you can see where this is going. Dan wondered if he'd be able to replicate his good fortune. Well, it seems like he did, because he tried another $200, $500, and $600. All of the money was dispensed. Just like before, none of those withdrawals appeared in his records. He'd gotten out $1,500 that night and said at the moment he thought it was an act of God. The following morning, he thought it was all a dream, but nope. When he checked his wallet, the money was still there. He thought, like many humans would, this is going to come back on me. So, he'd need to give it back. But he also thought, let me enjoy this while I can. I mean, what's the harm? You only live once, right? While this was going on, his fiancée wasn't aware. She was a primary school religion teacher and wouldn't have approved. She would have told him to give the money back and earn it the hard way like most of us. But who needs that? He tried to double his money so he could pay it back, but he'd already spent about $600. A couple of days after all of this began, he checked his savings account and it was down by $2,000. He thought back to the time he made these withdrawals. He went back 2 nights later and tried to transfer $2,000 from his credit card to his savings account. Again, it said transaction was canceled. So he put the card back in to get the balance from his savings account. It said $0. Then he put the card back in and transferred $1,000 from his credit card to his savings account. Now he's back in the green by $1,000. Then he tried to transfer $6,000 and like clockwork, he's up to $7,000. What was happening, you ask? Well, it was reported that every night between 1 to 3 a.m., that bank's network went down, so any amount up to 6 digits went through because there was no way to validate his credit limit, so the transactions went through. The key to this windfall was in the transfers, not the withdrawals. As long as he transferred the money between 1 a.m. and 3 a.m., he was good. A few weeks later, he was rolling in the deep with cash. There was no way he would be able to pay this money back. He was a bartender. He had a system worked out. Unfortunately, he developed a gambling problem too. His boss noted a spike in his betting activity at the pub where he worked, so he lost his job. Wayne Garada is a small city, so word spread really fast and made it back to his fiancée, who eventually broke up with him. Well, what else could go wrong? Now, he had no job and no woman. All bets were off. Time to live it up. He spent a lot of time with his head spinning, numbers just twirling, thinking about how he could keep this up. He was spending up to $40,000 a day. After he'd make the necessary transfers through the ATM, he'd walk into a branch and withdraw $90,000 cash money, then $100,000. He related the feeling of being given a bag containing $100,000 from the bank as being almost like a drug. He's quoted as saying it's super addictive fun thing to do, especially when the money literally comes from thin air. Thin air, huh? In a Vice.com article, he's quoted as saying, "Some of my friends told me I shouldn't be doing this. I don't want any part of it." But most of them didn't say that. Most of them were like, "Okay, you're that kind of guy who likes to ride the wave. I get what you're doing. We'll come along for a bit of the ride." And others were egging me on as well, saying, "You can do this or you can do that." And boy, did he do a little bit of this and a lot of that. One spending binge was when he chartered a private jet to take everyone to a remote island near Bali. That adventure included 4 guys and 8 females who spent 2 days partying naked. A lot of coke, a lot of drinking. He described as being, I quote, "off the hook," end quote. But as we'll see, it was still a lonely time for him though. As a total surprise, he had people asking him for money. He was bankrolling the habits of his quote unquote friends. People hung on to him for money. If you have the imagination and money, you're able to help people live their wildest dreams, Saunders told Vice. He also said, people who think you've got money, they treat you differently. He described an incident with a woman who asked him for $500 for a dress. He gave it to her and then she came back and asked for more, to buy shoes. Then she came back and needed $500 more for jewelry. He told his friend she wasn't coming back. Well, she did, but he rejected her as he felt she was using him for his money. Really? I mean, there's just no way she was using him for his money. That concept is totally unheard of. It simply defies logic. He did some good things with the bank's money though. He paid off a friend's tuition fees and sent another to study in France. He even paid for homeless people to have a place to stay for the night. See, not all bad, right? Saunders and his quote-unquote friends hopped from hotel to hotel, presidential suite to presidential suite, while reenacting scenes from Pretty Woman and Indecent Proposal. During all of this, the bank would call to verify charges. They'd call him and ask, "Was that you who spent 15 grand at Louis Vuitton?" or "Was that you who went to Gucci?" Now, these days it's primarily done by text messaging. But you know how the bank spots suspicious activity, and in order to secure your account, the charge is declined and the card is placed on hold until it's verified. They would say they're just trying to take care of his security and he would thank them. Now, that's funny, but that's not all. On one occasion, they called him to ask if he tried to get $900,000 from an ATM the night before. He said he was drunk, but asked, "I don't think you can get $900,000 from an ATM, can you?" They told him no, then said it must be some kind of glitch, and he responded, "Yeah, it must be some sort of glitch." What had actually happened was that he was trying to transfer $900,000 from his credit card to his savings account because you could transfer up to 6 digits. The bank rep thought he was trying to withdraw. Further example that they had no idea what was going on. At this point, it was still too big to walk away from. However, the stress was taking a toll on his body. He said, if you've pretty much done the right thing for the best part of your life and then start doing the wrong thing, your body freaks out. He began having anxiety attacks. During the first one that was diagnosed, the doctor asked him what he did for a living. Now, hold on to your seats. Remember, he's been staying at swanky hotels, living it up. One day he had a nightmare that the SWAT team was outside of his hotel door. He dreamt this at a time when he was at peace with whatever was going to happen to him. He'd resolved that he's done all he set out to do. He'd slept with really beautiful women, drunk the best wine, and gifted his friends with lavish things. So if this was the time, he's okay with it. He woke up in a pool of sweat, realizing that it was just a dream, and the hotel doorbell rang. He was like, "This is it. I'm gone. They're coming to get me," which would have actually been a relief. But it turned out to be the maid saying, "Would you like some fresh towels?" Which, as he claimed, I needed because I was sweating like an MF. His words, not ours. That's when he realized this couldn't keep going on. The first point of contact after he gave up the lap of luxury was a representative from the bank that called and told him his credit card was overdrawn by $770,000. He asked how much his credit limit was. It was $2,000, so he questioned how that could be possible, and of course, they couldn't explain it. Later, in June 2011, he called the bank because he wanted an explanation about some crazy things that have been going on with his account. Well, the bank rep told him that they knew what had been going on, that there'd be consequences, a police investigation, and that he'd be hearing from the police. 10 months later, nothing. He called a lawyer who told him to shut up about it. He was seeing a psychiatrist as a result of the guilt and the anxiety he was suffering from. He felt like he needed to talk to someone about it. The first psychiatrist he saw told Dan that he was not qualified to do this, and he was like, "Mate, you're the shrink, surely you're qualified." But then he found a guy who was a bit more sensible. He didn't tell him what to do specifically, but he did say that turning himself in would be an important step and it'd clear his conscience in making sure he could move on. Want to know how he chose to clear the air? He went to the Herald Sun and then several other media companies, including a video interview on a current affair. Basically, it took 3 print stories and an appearance on national TV to be taken seriously and told the world about it. Phew, this guy. The odds were in his favor because the bank would have been the ones looking like a pure idiot to not have caught this earlier. Heck, to even allow this to happen at all, which is why they were just going to write it off. But he had to go running his mouth. What do you think? Is this one of those things that's best kept to yourself? He was arrested in 2014, 3 years after this all began and ended. Now comes his trial. The judge didn't even know what he'd actually done. They played a video of the current affair interview on YouTube as evidence. He was charged with obtaining financial advantage by deception and he was sentenced to 2.5 years. That was fulfilled by a year in jail and 18 months in community service. These days, he works in hospitality, calmer, at peace, and knows who his friends are. He doesn't miss those times overall. He described that period as feeling like a secret language. He does say this could have happened to anyone. He has no regrets turning himself in, so to speak. He felt a connection to other inmates, learning about what brought them there, their hard lives. His advice to those persons thinking of getting into petty crime: don't lose yourself. Such wise words. A drunken night out, a fateful ATM stop, and a curious mind set off a chain of events that you only see in movies. Dan Saunders was able to scam his financial institution out of over $1 million due to a glitch in their system when their network went down. Ask yourselves, what would you do? Would you have stopped at the first $200? Reported it to the bank the next morning, or would you have kept going? Would you have a guilty conscience over the entire thing and turn yourself in, or would you quietly resume your life as normal, never reporting a thing? Would you want to know what it's like to be a millionaire at least once in your life, even if it breaks the law? Dan did, and he paid the price. We hope you enjoyed the journey of how one man stole $1.6 million from an ATM machine. Don't forget to react to this video and share your thoughts with us. We'd love to see them. Until next time.